Tonight on Legislative Review. Senate Democrats go over their proposed taxes to fund the operating budget. Plus, the House releases their proposed capital budget. And Governor Bob Ferguson weighs in on the operating budget. You're watching Legislative Review. Welcome to Legislative Review, your source for daily highlights in the state legislature. I'm Angela Nolasco. Facing an estimated $15 billion budget deficit over the next 4 years, the legislative session heads toward a crucial budget decision. Over the weekend, Senate Democrats' $78.5 billion proposed operating budget passed with a 28-21 vote. Among the budget's priorities, Senator June Robinson, chair of the Ways and Means Committee, said were K-12 education, housing, healthcare, food assistance, and difficult but necessary reductions in spending. The proposal includes several key taxes aimed at addressing the state's budget shortfall, with a focus on the wealthiest individuals and corporations contributing more. The tax package proposal follows a budget outlook that estimates a nearly $845 million loss in revenue over the next 4 years. The proposal seeks to rebalance the tax burden by asking the wealthiest to pay their fair share. These proposed taxes were the subject of a public hearing held late Monday, March 31st by the Senate Ways and Means Committee. Among those tax proposals, Senate Bill 5797, also known as the Financial Intangibles Tax, targeting individuals with assets over $50 million. This tax will charge $10 for every $1,000 of stocks, bonds, and mutual funds held by high net worth individuals. It's expected to raise about $4 billion per year starting in 2027 and will primarily fund public schools and support special education. Testifying in favor of the tax, Ryan Watt of the nonprofit group Economic Opportunity Institute said taxing the wealthy follows the vote of the people.
This bill would impose a modest tax on the wealth of the richest 4,300 or so people in Washington, people with more than $50 million in assets, in order to help fund public education, healthcare, and other critical programs. This proposal is popular. Washington voters overwhelmingly upheld the capital gains tax on the ultra-wealthy in last November's election, and a recent survey showed that 66% of respondents supported a tax on Washington residents with extreme wealth.
But not everyone is on board. Critics like initiative activist Tim Eyman called it a, quote, covet bill.
This is really just a covet bill, jealousy bill, envy bill, whatever you want to call it. But it's basically been the holy grail for decades. And that's the idea that not on your income, but what you own, everything in the world is going to be taxed. What's essentially happening is the government's going to take money away from people who earned it and give it to people who didn't. These people earned their money. They've already been taxed on it, and yet you want to tax it again.
Another key element of the proposed tax package, a Payroll Expense Tax, or Senate Bill 5796, which would apply to large employers with payrolls above the Social Security threshold. That's 5% of the total annual employee wages above the Social Security wage threshold. It would not apply to businesses with employee wages equal to or less than $7 million from the prior calendar year. Similar to Seattle's Jumpstart tax, it would affect roughly 5,000 companies and is projected to raise $2.3 billion per year, contributing to schools, healthcare, and services for vulnerable populations. Testifying in favor, Kristen Ang of Faith Action Network.
At a time when working families across our state face rising housing costs, underfunded schools, and barriers to healthcare and childcare, this bill is a powerful step towards economic justice and community resilience by generating billions of dollars to fund the essentials for our communities.
Speaking in opposition, Max Martin of the Association of Washington Business.
Our businesses pay nearly 50% of all state and local taxes, significantly higher than our West Coast neighbors, Oregon and California, who are both under 42%. Adding to that burden, risk driving employers and jobs out of our state and local communities.
Also discussed in the hearing, Senate Bill 5798, a proposal to remove the cap on property tax growth for public schools, cities, and counties, allowing tax increases to reflect population growth and inflation. Senate Democrats say it would generate an additional $779 million over 4 years. The bill aims to allow for a growth rate based on both inflation and population growth, which means property taxes could increase more in areas where the population is growing rapidly or where costs are rising. To help working families, a proposed half-point sales tax reduction, lowering the sales tax rate from 6.5% to 6%. It's expected to cost the state $1.3 billion per year, but aims to provide relief to households struggling with the rising cost of living. If passed, the tax proposals are set to net approximately $6 billion in the next 2 years and $11 billion in 2027 to 2029 after the sales tax reduction.
All right, good morning. Welcome to the Capital Budget Committee.
Members of the House Capital Budget Committee went over their proposed capital or construction budget Tuesday morning, April 1st. The $7.63 billion bipartisan proposal will cover the next biennium's costs of community investments, statewide infrastructure, climate investments, and several other grants and programs. It includes $4.64 billion in new general obligation bond spending and squares away $388 million in reserves. Key investments include $723 million for affordable housing, of which $80 million would benefit first-time low-income home buyers and $100 million is allocated for local supportive housing, $92 million for childcare, and over $1 billion investments in K-12 education, of which $563 million would go to the School Construction Assistance Program. Over $471 million would go to state and local behavioral health facilities, like the completion of Western State Hospital, which is poised to receive $282 million. And an estimated $133 million is allocated for behavioral health grants. The budget also earmarks over $2 billion for natural resources, including salmon recovery, $1.4 billion for higher education, of which $458 million would go to community and technical colleges, and $28 million to improve indoor air quality in public schools through the Climate Commitment Act. In a press release shared by House Democrats, Committee Chair Steve Theringer said the proposed budget sets aside more in reserves to anticipate the rise in costs from increased tariffs and price of materials. The full public hearing is available to stream online at tvw.org.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Governor Bob Ferguson held a press conference Tuesday to speak on both the House and Senate proposed operating budget.
Neither budget, however, is close to one that I can sign for two key reasons. First, they each propose far too much in taxes. Second, they both rely on a wealth tax, which is novel, untested, difficult to implement, and, most importantly, for purposes of adopting a sustainable budget, will face an immediate challenge in court.
Right off the bat, he expressed concerns over Democrat lawmakers' tax strategies, including the financial tangible assets tax.
I will not sign that. The legal arguments for a wealth tax are untested. The courts could go either way on that issue.
He praised both chambers for their proposed cuts, but highlighted the increase in the state's budget shortfall, a total of $16 billion over the next 4 years on top of current federal funding cuts, calling the budget crisis a, quote, five-alarm fire.
We can and we must prepare for even greater cuts from the federal government. We need to accept the reality that we are in the midst of unprecedented times with a federal government that is intent on making significant cuts no matter the resulting harm to Americans.
The governor called for a balanced budgeting approach, speaking against an all-cuts budget and the current tax proposals in both chambers.
We need to avoid overcommitting on new investments. Given our budget realities, this is not the time for major investments in any program, no matter how worthwhile. When you've got a $16 billion budget shortfall, you've got to stop digging.
He said he needs to see 5 things in an ideal budget that he would be willing to approve. Namely, the final budget should conserve the rainy day fund, one that's based on, quote, realistic revenue projections, that minimizes new investments and shows Washingtonians billions in savings from slashing inefficiencies. And, lastly, it has to be independent of revenue sources that could eventually be challenged in court, like the wealth tax.
Any budget I sign must spend only based on what our economic experts forecast our growth will be.
Ferguson also cautioned against the uncertainty of federal funding and the rise of tariffs as potential curveballs to the state's economy.
I'm not going to allow the state that I love to be at the financial mercy of Donald Trump and Elon Musk. That is not going to happen. We are in a challenging financial situation. We must not make it weaker.
The full presser is available on demand on tvw.org. That's a wrap for us tonight. Stay with us throughout the legislative session, where we bring you all the top debates right here on Legislative Review. We'll see you tomorrow.